Andy Kahn, you've actually called out Judge Morton for continuing to set bonds for offenders who commit more crimes while they're already out on bond. I think specifically one case Andy mentioned was Jeffrey Robertson. And at one point, he had 14 bonds in your court, and 7 of those 14 bonds were posted within 1 month. At some point, if someone gets a bond and they get released, and get a bond and get released, one of the conditions of release is that you not commit any more crimes, right? And so they're not following the rules of the court when they pick up more crimes, correct?
That's correct, yes, absolutely.
Okay, and so how many bonds is too many?
None.
That's a very good question. Hey folks, I live here too. Hey, hang on. I live here too. I don't want people getting out and committing new crimes.
You don't even ride the same elevator at the courthouse, sir. You take the back elevator. You're going to be so safe in your own courthouse.
Okay.
Every single judge doesn't ride up the same elevator or go out the same front doors. You have your own special entrance. Why are you afraid of the same people you're letting out into our community?
Okay, I think the judges will stick around at the end of the question.
No, you want to hear it now. You want to hear it now on that question.
I am with you 100%. I understand where you're coming from.
You have safety nets that we don't have, sir. There's metal detectors in the court, and you still will not ride up the same elevator as these defendants that you're letting out into our streets. A defendant that took the life of my 9-year-old niece, Arlene Alvarez.
What I can say is that each and every time a person gets a new case, I look at the prosecutors and say, do you want a hearing? And if they say no, there's nothing I can do. I have no choice under the law but to set another bail. That is the law. It's not the law that I want, it's the law that's written. I have to apply the law as written.
You're releasing them out on PR bonds. You released a man out on PR bond who shot at children. How can you reconcile with this? This is not just one case. You have made national news on several incidents, and yet you still are standing up here defending your actions. You are making Harris County a dangerous area, and yet for some reason you keep on doing the same thing over and over again. It's insane what you're doing.
I have no choice. It's our law. I understand that you don't like the law. It is okay not to like the law. I don't always like the law. I would love to change the law.
On to Judge Unger. When a felon defendant is out on bond and then they violate their bond conditions, what are there certain things or certain conditions that have to be met for a defendant to have their bond revoked or forfeited?
Absolutely, yes, there is. The Texas Constitution, as well as the Code of Criminal Procedure, cites out ways that can be done. And it's basically if a person violates a condition of bond that relates to community safety or safety of the victim, if the state requests a hearing, and if the hearing is held, and if they meet their burden by a preponderance of evidence, then we can hold them in at no bond. And as Judge Morton had mentioned, we are doing more and more of those hearings. I do not know of one time that I've heard of any judge saying, no, you can't have this hearing. I can tell you in my court, I don't know about the other ones. I can tell you I've never heard of a judge where the state has met its burden, that they have not granted the state's motion. And I will tell you in my court every single time that they've had a motion so far, they've met their burden and we have held people in at no bond. This is very important because as that quote that I told you from back in 2018, that people were getting out on bond after bond after bond, the only way that we can hold people in at no bond is by having those hearings, and it's especially important now. I will tell you that I've had people, and we've all probably had these situations, that I've set bond on somebody, then they'll go out, and I'll say, okay, we'll double the bond. Then they'll go out again, get rearrested. And at some point I'm looking at the state and I'm like, are you filing a motion? Nothing. It's not, finally, after 3 or 4 or 5 times, I keep doubling and doubling and doubling people. It was astonishing me. I've had people make $300,000 in bonds at really fast clip. And finally, now we are doing these hearings and we are holding people in at no bond. I think it's important that we get those hearings and that the state, just go, and by the state, I mean the DA's office, they go forward with that, especially on those violent cases.
Okay, and so just to kind of recap what you said, if the state has a motion to do this hearing within a certain amount of time, a judge can hold a defendant at no bond. If the state misses that deadline, the judge can still set another bond.
Well, sort of.
Okay.
When it comes to a motion to revoke, there's no bond. There's no deadline like that. So,
For the no bond.
okay.
If they miss this,
There's still no deadline.
there is.
Okay.
They can do it anytime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Certain provisions of the
There,
contract.
yeah. So,
Hillary, I was gonna answer this.
okay, you can answer that one. But as far as motions to revoke bonds, which is the question that you asked me, there is no deadline, and frequently it'll be 3 and 4 weeks. I've had them at 5 weeks, 6 weeks, where the state will finally have the hearing.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make this quick and not boring. All right, so the only way that a judge can deny someone bail without the state requesting a hearing, putting on evidence, and meeting a burden is if the person is on a straight probation and they've already been convicted of a felony. If they have a motion to revoke that probation, the court can hold them without bail, without the state of Texas having to do anything. Outside of that, what governs this is the Texas Constitution. There is a section called 11A. Under 11A, the state has to file a motion requesting a hearing. That hearing, depending on what their allegations are, have to happen, get this, within 48 hours of the arrest or within 7 days, okay? In many of those situations, how long do you think, let's say the state files their motion, we have our hearing within that very short period of time, and the court finds that the state met their burden and they deny bail. How long would you expect that that defendant, accused, can be held without bail having had that hearing? 60 days. The Constitution says that even after that 11A hearing, the defendant can only be held for 60 days without bail, and after that, the Texas Constitution mandates that we have to, is that 8 o'clock? That we have to set a bail legally. Why is it that way? I have a feeling that when it was written, trials could happen within 60 days. You didn't have DNA, you didn't have forensics, you didn't have ballistics. In Harris County right now, it takes 1 year to get the ballistics back if a firearm is used. It takes 9 months to get the 911 call in. It can take over a year to get the DNA analysis. That is how overburned we are. That 60 days is long gone, and we have to set a bail. Now the exception is what Judge Unger was talking about, which is 11B. 11B says that if someone is already on bond, so that's already happened, they're on bond, and they violate a condition of that bond that's related to community safety, then the state can file a motion, they have to request a hearing, and at that hearing they have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant committed something on bond that violated the bond conditions. Those are the hearings that we are having every week. Every week we are having those 11B hearings. I had 0 of those hearings when I was a prosecutor. 0. And I was there for a decade. I was a chief when I left. And I think Judge Antu, and I think Judge Morton, and I think Judge Guinea would all agree that those were very, very rare until very, very recently. So all of that to say, limited ways, but there's only one way without the state having a hearing, putting on evidence.
So one follow-up to that, Judge Guido. So the last legislative session, there was a push to give judges more discretion to hold defendants at no bond when they were charged with certain violent crimes. Do you feel like you have the tools that you need to be able to do this job, or would you like to have more discretion?
I think I'm a little bound. All I would say is that I want to make sure I don't step into any ethical gray area here.
Options in any area are always very nice to have.
I agree, and I hope, if I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. I think we can all agree that 60 days is not going to do any good for anybody. And so I will step out on my ethical limb and say, I would certainly hope that that 60-day limit is updated. I guess that's what I can say. But the more discretion you give us, I think the better. And yeah, I would say that. Now I was talking to Judge Unger, and I'm gonna let you get it too, so I'm gonna let you speak. But Judge Unger and I were talking about how she's from New York, and I don't know if she already said this. I was watching Law and Order recently, and I saw the prosecutor get up and say, "I move for remand," and the judge said, "Granted." And I thought, oh my gosh, no wonder it feels like judges can just hold people without bond, because in other jurisdictions they can. And so I don't feel ethically like I can step out and tell y'all how to vote or what the law should be or if Texas Constitution amendments are needed. That's for the voters to decide. But that's the law as it is right now. Judge Morton.
I did want to give a shout out, just like Judge Geiger, when I was a prosecutor, there were 0 of these hearings. I didn't see one until I was a defense attorney, and I had it in front of my good friend Judge Gimbel. Very first one I ever saw.
Is that
Because
also
she knows
true
law.
with capital murder? Are you able to deny a bond with capital murder or no?
If there's a hearing.
And does the state have to call the hearing, or is that a decision you
Yes,
guys can make?
yes, ma'am. So if someone is charged with capital murder, and thank you for bringing me up, you're right, that is an exception, but again, it requires what's called a proof evident hearing. So again, the state has to request the hearing. There is no time limit on this, as far as I know, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. So they can, pre-indictment, thank you, Judge Anderson.
Before it's indicted, it's indicted.
Okay, within 90 days. And then the proof evident hearing, the state actually has to put on evidence that they intend to seek the death penalty and that will be the likely outcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So yes, it's still through a hearing with evidence. And I will never step on a prosecutor's decision about strategically whether or not that's something that they want to do, expose their witnesses to being on the record.
Well,